Okay, I have it streaming. Everything is fine, so I don't see any agenda for today, though. Do you folks have anything? I have it streaming. Everything is fine, so.
I don't have anything specific. I've been sort of out of the loop working on other things, and so I will probably start digging back into the pull request backlog for notation and try to get back on that. And Toddy, if you'd like, I can sync with you after this on some of the other stuff just to see where my priorities are and if it's the right place.
Yeah, sure. I honestly don't know any priorities for the Notary project website right now. We need to look through the backlog. I have not been looking at those in the last 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, me either. So
yeah, we can eventually ping Feynman and E. I know that we still have some kind of governance items that we need to work on. Those may be kind of a little bit delayed. That we need to wrap up. I remember we had a bunch of readmes that were in a PR state. I don't think you will be too involved in those. So I see Sajid's message about GitHub action docs. Yeah, I was actually going in that direction. So things like new things like GitHub actions, any fixes. Maybe we can look briefly in the backlog.
I mean, I think there's some cleanup PRs that probably need to be processed in the backlog. I don't know if the refactor PR was ever merged, and if it was, if it wasn't, that needs to get in there. And then there's some follow-on work. I need to drop in the updated CLI reference content for 1.0 because that's not in there. I was waiting on the refactor to be complete. So I think there's just a bunch of cleanup work that needs to happen, but from like a pure doc generation perspective, yeah, I think GitHub actions and anything else that you all would be interested in.
Yeah, I also, so I don't know whether you know, but we recorded a meeting, a podcast with Whitney Lee from Tanzo. So Melinda and I were on this podcast. There were quite interesting things that actually we discussed there. And I asked Feynman and E if they can actually pull some of this information and eventually create a article on the Notary project website about that. So there were things like, for example, how does Notary project compares with Sigstore? That's one thing, and we quite often get this question. The other thing was really kind of very brief summary of the capabilities that we offer and the benefits, and eventually the extensibility. That is actually one thing that I think it will be helpful for user documentation to offer on the website too.
Sure. I mean, based on how you've described it, I think at minimum you're going to need a blog post to, sort of cross post and promote the podcast that you all were on and link to it just to make sure that people following Notary can, get into that. And then I think I am happy to go through the content from that podcast and see where it fits in a pure documentation perspective in addition to the blog post. That's what you all were talking about, right?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to take that on as an action item.
I will share the blog post with you. I mean the podcast, not the blog post, and it will be also helpful for you to really understand some of the concepts. So Milind was going very well through what was the thinking like 2 years ago when he joined Notary project. So that was even helpful for me.
Cool. That sounds great.
Okay, I'm just trying to capture some notes here. Today is September 7th. Okay, and so. I will share my screen and we can look at the PRs, the current PRs for the documentation. And eventually you can tell me what is important from there. And Sajay already shared the link to the podcast, so I'll add it to the notes after that. Let me know when you can see my screen.
Yep, see it.
So we have 28 that are still open. New landing page, expand on the trust store concepts.
Can you scroll down a little earlier? Yeah, stop. Okay. So I'm just trying to see. Yeah, so the at the very top line, number 312, I'd say that's highest priority to get through. That's sort of been something that I meant. I can't remember if I committed to getting that done last week or not, but that's sort of that. This is honestly just blocking a bunch of other stuff.
Let me add it. And
I mean, it's on me to go back through it and verify the state. I mean, if it's non-blocking, I'm happy to just merge it to sort of unblock people, as long as it doesn't like break a build.
so
I'd go all the way to the, yeah, go all the way.
So there are two changes requested by Samir and Feynman. So we need to eventually do those changes and get their approvals again. I don't know what changes they requested. Is that your PR or Rosalind's?
It's Rosalind's PR. We went back and forth a whole bunch. It's been open for a long time. That was the whole back and forth refactor discussion. She owns it. I have merge permission, but I can't. But I mean, I have same permissions as you, but it can't be merged until crap. She's got to rebase too.
Yeah, she has to rebase also.
So I mean, I'm happy to stage PRs, but just to be completely honest with you, like this is a choke point.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. What else do you think is so? This is the kind of a blocking that we need to resolve as soon as possible. I will make Feynman and E aware so they can work with Rosalind to really get this done.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, if their feedback is no longer relevant, it just needs to be cleared, so that it can be merged. And then I think once that's in, I think that will hopefully unblock a lot of other things in here, and that will unblock a lot of like net new work. I can do the CLI work. You know, I feel more comfortable merging a lot of other things. Some of this older stuff, I know I commented on a few weeks ago. I'd say 3 weeks ago or longer, I went through and sort of comment and left feedback on a lot of stuff and try to clear this stuff out. Some of it just seems either old or outdated.
Yeah, we are getting actually back to 2022.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've left comments on, I think I left comments on some of these older ones asking like, hey, can we get rid of this?
Well, if we are not getting traction on those, I would say let's go and get rid of those. Like everything that's more than 6 months ago. I don't know, I may be a little bit controversial in my thinking, but if it is not done in the last 6 months, what are the chances that we'll do it? If it is important, it will pop up again in the next couple of months. So I would say everything that's older than this year, we can safely go and say, look, we are cleaning up here and we are closing this one. If it is important, open a new issue.
Sure. I think after the cleaning that up, I think the next one is probably there's a landing page rework that's done, and I can take another look at that. I think that's gone through several iterations. There's a bunch of PRs that are stacked up in the backlog that are just bug fixes on the current landing page and some things like that. So I think that maybe the new landing page styling will just obviate the need for some of those PRs, and we can just close them out. So I can do just some community work and some PR cleanup. I know I had done a pass on it about a month ago, but I have not checked back in on it.
Okay. I added that we'll clean. Sorry, I kind of missed some of the things that you just mentioned. You said that. Can you maybe?
Yeah, landing page, the landing page PR, which is higher up on the list. I think if we can get that merged, I'll double check that one just to make sure that everything's cool with that. If I can get that one in after the refactor and it doesn't need a big rebase, I think that'll actually help me clear out, excuse me, a bunch of other pull requests that are lower, that are earlier in the queue. There's a handful of pull requests from that I think the landing page PR may fix, because some of those PRs are just fixing site bugs and display bugs. There was a big effort by the individual who I believe did the landing page refactor to just fix a bunch of UI, UX issues that they found when going through the site. And I think the landing page styling may fix some site-wide issues that they had been experienced that were trying to fix in earlier PRs. So that's my hope.
Okay.
And I know from like a net new content, GitHub Actions. Sorry, I'll let you finish.
Who was on the landing page? That was Sanjay, right? That was...
No, that's, yeah, Sanjay.
Sanjay, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think besides the GitHub Actions net new content,
yeah, I think that one.
Yeah, so GitHub Actions and then installation methods. I saw somewhere that somebody was calling out that their packages are now available on Homebrew for Mac OS install of the Notation CLI client. So checking out those places and probably updating the install docs, maybe making one per platform, depending on how big it gets. But that's probably some net new content that needs to be fixed in the near term.
Okay, that is Zach. Okay, and let me add this one. Yes, I So Whitney did actually a very good summarization at the end of the podcast, Zach. What is Notary Project? So if we can actually create a single page for that, and we may even ask her to actually get a screenshot of the whiteboard that she did. If she has it, that will be great, because that actually was, she summarized it in a very simple language, because keep in mind, she had no idea what Notary Project was. And during these 2 hours, kind of, she was able to gather all this information and summarize it at the end. So if we can get a single page for that, that will be great, as well as comparison, like what are the difference between Notary Project and Sixtor.
Sure. I'm happy to synthesize the information from the podcast in text form. I think if we take a screenshot of the podcast, of that image from the podcast, we'd probably have to get VMware's permission to use it, because we don't technically own that content. The alternative would be to look at it and synthesize and replicate it in like a SVG or something like that, which I think we should have the rights to do. Based off of that. But I mean, at the very least, I think we should at least give VMware or her a heads up, like, hey, this is what we're doing. It's cool. Yeah,
certainly. If we take a screenshot, we need to ask Whitney, and I'm happy to kind of broker this conversation between you and her. Sure. Anything else that comes to mind, Sajay? How is like that's the 312. Okay, sorry. I'm scrolling up and down. Yeah, go ahead, Sajay.
This is still in discussion, but do we need to have a page describing the release cadences and things like that for Notary and the support structure for Notary?
Yes, we do.
Would this also be inclusive of like the release page that says release of Notary Project equals this version of the spec, this version of the CLI, so on and so forth?
Maybe. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is the next version of Notary is in about, I think we discussed in November. So it would be good to, for notation would be in November. That would include a small update on the spec and things like that. So it would be good to probably prepare how the next Notary Project release looks like. And if you have PRs that might accrue to that, we should probably start in maybe in the next 6 weeks at least. Because in about 12 weeks, you have the next release plan. That's why.
We certainly should document that thing and kind of provide expectations for the customers and make sure that we...
I know it sounds backward, but I think the docs can actually influence your question, Tori, of whether we want to support pass release or major release in some way.
And I think when we do this release in November, we'll know more about how we can support it and what will be the overhead. So I'm fine kind of waiting until November release to make that decision what we'll support, and we can go and update this page. But I think we should start putting a page to say, okay, we plan to release every quarter, like something like this.
I would be very careful about forward-looking statements. Like I know it helps for like planning, but it just like when you start making forward-looking statements in written form, especially when you have a history preserved and they turn out not to be true or things change, like, yeah, as long as I think you're transparent and saying, hey, this got delayed, that's fine. But it can also add pressure or perception that you're missing things when you're not.
That's fair. That's fair. Yeah, agree. We still need to. Sorry, Zach, on this topic still, we still need to, because my thinking is, let's say, I know that, for example, Microsoft Windows will release every month some updates, right? And a lot of folks are really used to that, and they know that they will be fixed. Unless the product disappears from the market completely, right? I can expect every patch Tuesday to get the patches. Especially when we deal with security, and there was a talk on, I think, Black Hat this year from some of our government officials saying like this should be also strategy that open source projects do, because right now open source projects are very unpredictable on this, and the government expects that, for example, you have some predictability into the patch schedule. That's, I think, what is important. Whether we'll release new features, and we had this conversation on Monday's meeting, is a separate question. But if things like, for example, are discovered that are problematic, like bug fixes or security issues specifically, then we should have some predictability how often people will be actually getting updates. And we don't need to do that on a monthly basis because that's too often, especially for having in mind the resources. But once a quarter, we should target and we should set this expectation that you will get at least one update with patches and bug fixes within a quarter. That's what I wanted to have raised as a question, whether we can commit to that, or you still think that this is actually something that may be dangerous from kind of not meeting the expectations of the customers.
I think as long as if you write it down and we put it on the docs or the website, I think as long as you say our plan is to try to release at least quarterly with updates to the CLI that would include vulnerability patches, security patches, and bug fixes in order for, and give your reasoning for stability reasons and so on and so forth. These plans are subject to change. Please see our roadmap and releases for the latest information on the current status of the release, or something like that, where as long as you don't say we will definitely release every quarter, as long as you put in the caveats a bit like, we want to do this, we're going to try to do this, but it may not happen for whatever reason, that's fine. I think as long as you're not like firmly committing and saying this is going to happen come hell or high water, you're good.
I understand what you're saying, and I totally agree with that. Yeah, we will not firmly say we will release on the second Tuesday of every second month of the quarter, right? So, okay, cool. Makes sense. I see, Sajay, that links to the cloud providers. I would say not only links to the cloud providers and other projects and vendors that integrated with Notary project tooling, because we have, like, so far I know we have that's AWS, Azure, we have HashiCorp, we have Containerd and Harbor and Kyverno. So those are kind of the, I think we had some page like that. I do not remember where it is in the documentation.
I think we have a FAQ entry, like an FAQ entry that has the list of those currently.
Yeah, if we can just continuously update that thing and add more to this list, that will be good for us, and that will also help us kind of move through the CNCF kind of ladder for graduated project, right? So we need to, I asked Feynman and E to really capture this information every 6 months and so on. Okay, anything else, Sajay, Zach?
No, I just added the link to the Azure Key Vault plugin that got released, right? So how customers can use Azure as the docs. I don't. The point is like AWS has a similar sign containers like this, and they'll keep adding stuff more. So it would be good for like a page where this is how you can. These are all the integration partners, and go see here, or a running blog of now in X, now in Y kind of a thing. Whatever style of docs that's recommended.
Mm-hmm.
I've got something after this, but yeah, please keep going.
I think Sajid is done. So, Zach, want to go?
Yeah. So the last thing is we need to start talking about versioning now. Maybe not in this meeting, but like regularly, like this needs to be a topic of conversation that needs to get sorted out soon. If you all are planning or intending to release sometime in November, that's 6 or 8 weeks away. And last time when we started talking about versioning, that was a multi-week conversation that we ended up punting when we got close to the 1.0 because we said we can solve that problem later. Well, it's later. And so I want to, like, it seems like we kind of came to the consensus that we're doing a semi-system style release where we're mapping a notation project, or sorry, notary project release with versions of each specific sub-project, which is fine. But we have to see how this relates to versioning within the docs. This starts to sprawl into what's the support story, because we need to have documentation for any supported releases. So if you decide like an N-1 or an N-2, then we need to have docs for each one of those supported versions. And that, like, we need to figure out what that looks like on the doc site. So it's, you know, affirming that this is the release style that we're going to do. This is the versioning, like, that everyone's cool with. There's no changes that need to happen. And then we need to start building out all of these things that work for versioning and make decisions. There's like Git decisions that need to be made. You know, I think we can come to a conclusion, but just, I know that conversations and decisions distributed across the team can take a lot of time. And so I want to start this now so that it's not like October 15th and we're trying to get this sorted in 2 weeks.
Do we have an issue for that, Zach?
I'm not sure if we have an issue or not. I can create one and we can discuss it back and forth, but I will just,
I would suggest that we create an issue, and maybe if you have a proposal, just write the proposal in that issue. Because we would like to get some formal kind of discussion there and formal approval. I remember as you said, we discussed this on several occasions in the last couple of weeks. And right now I'm blanking out even how the discussion went, right? And whether we were even converging on something or it was wide open still.
What we converged on, the decision that we agreed upon, and Sajay, correct me if I'm wrong on this, was we were doing a quasi-system release of the Notary project, and we would document the system release mapping to versions of each sub-project. So we'd say Notary project 1.0 release equates to notation version 1.0.0, you know, spec version this, Go library that, you know, all those, any versioned sub project, we would do that mapping. And then we decided that we would keep the documentation unversioned for 1.0 because we weren't supporting anything before 1.0. But for subsequent releases post 1.0, we'd have to have some sort of plan in how it gets displayed in the docs, because we would have to make a decision also about support and supported versions. And we'd have to have a story around what signifies a new notation project release outside of like individual sub-project releases. That was my memory of how the conversation ended, which basically left us to say, okay, we can punt on everything except for the fact that we've made this decision.
Okay, let's file an issue with what you just described, and let's target to get this resolved in the next maybe 2 weeks, if possible.
If this is, if this is solved if it's by the end of the month, I'm fine with it. It just, I don't want this to be something that hangs around and we never get solved.
Yeah, certainly. Okay. What else?
I'm good.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So we can file an issue and follow up. Toddy, just to kind of like put in my bias here, I really like the Kubernetes release process where there is an expected release happening every 3 or 4 months, like every SIG or whoever kind of like comes in, says this. And that way, when there is somebody talks about Kubernetes 1.27, 1.28, they know what is coming in there, and it becomes easy to kind of aggregate everything. Now, for example, we might do the spec rev for the November release to support arbitrary file signing, right? So the notation and the spec might rev, but the plugins might not rev, or GitHub Actions might not rev. So it would be good to have what 1.1 is, not just for notation, but for Notary project also. So every 4 months, once in a year, you might have 4 minor releases. That's kind of how it goes. And I feel it's more predictable, and people can expect a pattern rather than we randomly choose every time.
That's what I meant, at least to set this expectation. So one thing that we can do is, like, after we do a release and let's say take a week or something to agree on the next what will be released next time, we can write a blog post and say, okay, this is what we are planning for, like release in November or in February or something like this. Predictability, for me, I agree with you. That is something that I would expect from every piece of software, right?
I think if you want to try to do a quarterly schedule, I would try. I think we should probably get together with Feynman and Yi and everyone else involved in the release and try to understand how much time it takes to do the pure release work, and see, hey, are there efficiencies that can be gained? So for instance, if it takes a couple of days, doing a release once a quarter, I don't think is a big lift. But if it takes 2.5 weeks to get everything together, to get a release, that's eating up a lot of time per quarter to get stuff out. So I think, yeah. I don't disagree that, a regular cadence would be really, really helpful, even a quarterly one. But I think understanding the quantity of time it takes to get just the release out the door, I think would be really helpful in gauging how often to do releases and where can we improve things.
I really hope that we will improve in that, and we'll be able to do it faster and faster, the release. So I don't think it should be actually especially if you do more often releases, the overhead should be less, in the sense of you don't have, let's say, big integration tests that you need to do or something like this. That would be my expectation.
I think it just, from what I've observed, it seems like there's a lot of just communication and time overhead in everyone agreeing to certain things and everyone coming to a consensus like, yes, this is what will go into the release. And yes, this is ready. So, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of pure technical things. It seems like it's a little more administrative and process oriented. So
certainly. Okay. Anything else that comes to your mind? If not, then I think so. I will have conversation with Feynman and E about these things. So Zach, maybe for you, the main thing is like if you can actually create the issue for the versioning and look at this new content. I will make sure that Feynman and E are working with Sanjay and Rosalind on the things to be completed. So hopefully they can figure out this before Monday's meeting, and we can close those 2 PRs.
I'll get the GitHub project updated with everything and just send out links to them. Say, hey, like this, and this need responses.
Okay, cool. If not, then that's all for today. Sanjay, do you have something else or?
No, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Toddy.
Okay. Thanks, folks.
Thanks,
have a nice day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.